Hello and welcome to the first of many in-person episodes of Joker Part. This is Series 2, Episode 1. This show should always be a live show. Literally, I'm alive. And today, I'm here with a very special guest. He's so special, we're outside. And that's rare for me, because I don't go outside. As you can see, I try to stay as further away from people as possible, but not today. Today I'm here with a very, very good guest. He's best known as a comedian and comedy character actor, on par with Alan Partridge, Steve Coogan's Alan Partridge, not Alan Partridge being a person on his own. It's the one and only, hopefully I say his last name correctly, it's the one and only Tom Burgess.
That's absolutely correct. Thank you very much. Bravo.
Welcome. So we'll start at the very beginning, because Julie Andrews will not shut up about saying it's a good place to start. I've told her off many times. How did you get into the wonderful world I like to call funny ha-ha comedy?
Cool. Oh, funny ha-ha comedy I'm not in yet. But well, how did I get into comedy? I think, well, it started for me. I think I always wanted to make people laugh from childhood anyway. Yeah. But I think actually starting performing comedy started in my late teens when I went to university. So I went over in Sheffield and a comedy society had just started up there, the Sheffield Review. And I'd already started writing comedy sketches, but I hadn't done much performing. And arguably it turned out I was much better at that. So I started performing sketches with this little troupe that was just made up of whoever happened to come along to the meetings each week. Yeah. And it meant that you performed infrequently, but it was still good practice to do it. We never quite mastered the art of churn and just getting that many shows together, so you're just always pumping material out there. But from that, I ended up joining a couple of sketch groups, one of which was the appallingly named Staple Face, and also impossible to Google. Don't try it. Horrendous. YouTube also, awful, horrible results. But we had loads of fun going up to the Edinburgh Fringe for a couple of years with myself and Sam Nicoresti and Mike Bentley. Yeah. And Sam Nicoresti and I are still in a sort of semi-regular double act, Sam and Tom. I think we're in a sort of Radiohead situation now where we do come together again, but only once every 6 or 7 years. And so that was the start of it all. And then we carried on doing shows as Sam and Tom. But it's always been through sketch comedy, I think, that I've ended up on stage the most. And that paved the way for doing solo stuff later on, which is the same for Sam as well. Yeah. Yeah, and you mentioned there your sketch comedy group. It's not as bad as Exploding Heads. When you try and Google their name, it literally comes up with Exploding Head. Well, it's great for David Cronenberg fans, but other than that, it's not much luck.
No, because they're very good at spoofing LBC, and then LBC are very good at spoofing them. Yeah. Yes. So when you joined the lucrative, the famous comedy circuit, what was it like when you joined it? So your first era of joining it?
Well, you could argue in a way we never joined the comedy circuit in a mainstream way, because I think it was starting out in Sheffield and trying to get gigs for a sketch group was quite difficult. There weren't that many alternative comedy gigs around. You had to set up your own nights. So we were lucky that we were living in Sheffield at the same time as Sean Morley, who's this amazing alternative comic. I think he's living in the Netherlands right now, but he will come back. It's just cheaper to get to London now, waiting from the north of England. A lot quicker as well. Yeah. But he would set up for lots of alternative comedy nights, and you'd find out, oh, there's a sketch group over in Manchester, oh, there's a night over in Leeds. So you would just try and bounce between the cities as much as you could. I think London was a bit better for a thriving sketch scene. There were a few more troupes and groups that were at work there at any one time, but it was difficult, but I think it made us better at what we were doing because you were trying to come up with sketch comedy that would work at a stand-up night. And to try and keep the laughs at the same sort of rate the stand-ups were managing, because otherwise it could be very stagey and you'd have a lot of awkward pauses, which you can see sketch groups early on, I think, in their careers do more and more. And we probably did it loads as well, but we were better than some. Yeah. And that was all we needed, just not to be the very worst. That would do for us.
And how did your comedy character Peter Fleming come about? To me, it sounded like a James Bond character.
Well, where the name, I think, accidentally has come from, and Toby Haydock has been able to join the dots for me. When I was a teenager, I had the DVD of A for Andromeda and the Andromeda Break, all those early sci-fi series. Yeah. And the name itself, I've now realised, comes from Peter Halliday playing John Fleming. And I've subconsciously fused those, and that's where it's come from. Because I watched that when I was 14, over and over again. I've got all the cult DVDs that I could, and that has obviously sunk in on some primal level. But where the character originally came from, I think it all stems back to me being a Doctor Who fan. So I got into it when I was 8 years old, when it was still about off the air.
Yeah.
So the way I got into it was by discovering various secondhand VHSs from the video crypt in my hometown, now gone, sadly. I can't believe the market for VHS dried up. But it meant that I got into it piecemeal, and one of the first VHSs I got was Cybermen, the early years.
Oh, yeah.
Which made me aware of the idea of missing TV for the first time and the lost episodes. And I think that kind of fascination with the idea of gaps and the tragedy and all this work that went in that was lost, but also that aesthetic of, quite clunky DIY seeming, it now seems to modernise TV, but being so up against it, but still making something really magical for people at home and being so invested in it. I think it comes from watching those retrospective documentaries. I think it all comes from that.
Yeah. And you can still buy DVDs on Amazon, as I know all too well, £10 each. I've bought loads of VHS off Amazon that are still working.
Oh, that's perfect. All right.
I bought Red Dwarf, the first series, it was in working condition.
Well, I've just left a corner of my flat, so that's great.
Yeah.
Perfect.
I also have a VHS player that actually works as well, so I'm that sad. And do you reckon that you and Toby Haydock, I've interviewed him before, you can find that on my main channel, do you reckon you and Toby Haydock have got the same corner of niche comedy where it's like you're into a TV program and you want to make it as linked to possible so you get paid for doing something you love?
I think that must be part of it, yeah. It's funny, I last did my most recent Peter Fleming show about Doctor Who at his XS Malarkey in Manchester, and it was so funny that he was just saying, whilst he was complimenting the night, he was saying, so I'm just going to welcome on a show where a Doctor Who fan is doing a comedy show about Doctor Who. And he was, I didn't realise I was poaching on his territory, it turned out. But yes, we've definitely, I think him and me and probably people like Mark Gates as well, a whole part of where we're all coming from must be that we have this thing that we've loved since we were all kids, and we're trying to keep it alive and inhabit that world as best we can. Yeah,
and Toby Haydock is very funny because his special is currently available on Amazon with Audible. So it is available. So hopefully, if you decide to film yours, because the poster is immaculate, then that should also be available on Amazon Prime, because you can put your own stuff on Amazon Prime, unless it's Doctor Who related. Mine was, because I did a documentary, and Amazon thought it was not good enough, because it didn't have enough subtitles in Japan or Germany.
Oh.
So it went, sorry.
Charming.
No, thanks. So where did the show all about Peter Fleming and Doctor Who even come from anyway?
Well, it's interesting. I think after I'd done the debut live show as Peter, which was in 2019 at the Edinburgh Fringe, I think, what kind of show would I do now? Because the show that I had been working on, I think I performed it about twice in 2020, and one of those occasions it went fairly well. I think I suddenly realised it was getting a little bit convoluted, and I was getting too invested in trying to justify little bits of backstory, and it was getting very fussy. And I realised I should just chuck all that away and start with something else. And as I was getting back into live comedy, it was 2022, so I decided to pin a show on what is a good selling point for this year. So it was the BBC 100 year. So I made a show all about that and thought, what is Peter Fleming's take on this event? And then at the end of that year, I thought to myself, okay, well, do I want to have a break? Yes, I absolutely do. And then I thought, Doctor Who's 60 next year, isn't it? And I thought, well, that's another anniversary. And I'm sure that going forward, if I do more live shows in the future, it will probably be relating to some sort of TV anniversary in some way. I mean, a couple of years from now, maybe Peter Fleming versus ITV. That seems too good an opportunity to pass up, but we'll see.
Yeah, and with you having this Doctor Who show, you got to do one thing that the Doctor Who magazine never let me do: appear in it. What was it like appearing in Doctor Who magazine?
Well, it was a huge relief, because I thought I probably wouldn't get in, because I had asked, I think in 2019 to promote the first show, but there just wasn't a clear enough link to Doctor Who.
Yeah.
And I think, it's understandably that as a licensed magazine, they have to be careful with what things they do and don't promote. But luckily, I think because Peter Fleming is so niche, I think there was no risk I was going to make any money off it. So I think they were able to just about justify putting it in.
Yeah.
And because it was coming up to the Edinburgh Fringe, it was the August issue, so it made sense to give it a little rectangular affair. But I've got an issue of that magazine, and I will keep it forever, along with all the other ones that I've got, which I've never got rid of. I think I got my first issue when I was about 8 years old in, I want to say, January 2000. It was full of disgruntled letters about the BBC Two Doctor Who night. If you want any context for it, that's what the fans were angry about that month.
Yeah. Now they're angry about everything under the sun, literally, including the sun. Not the Sun newspaper. No, we're never going to be angry at them. We're just going to be angry at the actual Sun. Now, one of the things you've done that a lot of people have worked on that have now gone to really, really big things, so you're included in that. What was it like working on the amazing, but yet sadly now discontinued and poorly available elsewhere, Newsjack?
Oh, dear old Newsjack. It was a lot of fun, that, and I think I hadn't been able to feature on it in any of the previous ones. I think because it's just a weekly show, you have to get who's available in the area. It's hard to, rush people down on a train from elsewhere, and because mostly it was done in London. But whilst it was still going in its last couple of years, and I think Kiri Pritchard-McLean was a real champion of this, trying to get more shows out of London and do a few more in different regions of England, in the nations as well. So it led to there being 2 that were done in the Comedy Store in Manchester. And I think she was able to say, okay, these are lots of really good comics who you haven't been able to get on, so let's try them now. And I think she also managed to encourage them to get more Northern comics into the writers' room as well. So I think people like Josh Pugh, I think, were in the writers' room for one of those episodes as well. But that was a special night, especially the first one, which was, I think, late 2019.
And do you reckon that because of Newsjack's sadly demise and the birth of DMs, do you reckon that type of format is still workable on radio? Do you reckon that format should evolve into the world of TV?
Well, I think it's definitely workable, I think. And I think it's important that the BBC has public submission shows like that, because how else are people going to get their first writing credit? It can be so difficult to get that first line on your CV. It's really, really tough out there. So I think you definitely need it. So even if it's difficult, that's something that's really worth the investment. DMs are open is interesting, where people can send in voice notes as well. And I suppose the more and more you have comedians finding their feet and getting a following through putting reels on Instagram or TikTok or YouTube or whatever, then it could open up as a TV format. I mean, goodness knows if it ever will. And the real problem these days is getting something to be successful enough early on, so you don't have commissioners saying, well, you've had a week and it's not a smash yet, so sorry everyone, goodbye.
And I think the way we could do it is if we bring back the UK version, because it's successful in Australia, and thank God you're here, because that would work really well in the everyone submits material, but the community that's on it still has no clue what on earth is going on, because Adam Hills was on the recent Australian series and it did very well.
How much was that up? Great. Okay.
Now, you've also created a podcast using your comedy character, Peter Fleming. Where did that glorious yet wonderful idea come from?
Well, I think because of the timings, it will come across that it was an idea to keep the character going. I'd been thinking about doing some sort of audio version of Peter's story, his adventures, before lockdown hit. But I think the format would have been very different. I think it probably would have been him talking to guests and probably messing up the entire format. But as it was, because it was done in isolation, and I was basically doing it at my coffee table with a duvet on top of my head. So there's the image. That's what it always looks like, if you're ever wondering. I think it meant that show took probably the best shape it could have taken, because it meant it was all about Peter's loneliness, which I think is such a useful thing to drive that character. And you see it there in the live show as well. He's clearly a very unhappy man, but still has a smile in spite of it all, and is still trying to make things work against all the odds. And I think with him being on his own like that, I think it was a good chance to explore using audio as a medium as well, the podcast. I think the chance to take some of the things I've done as live shows and create actual, found footage, lost clips, like they've been taped off air by some kid in the 60s. What was fun about that was recording things at relatively high quality and then having to make it sound as bad as possible. And I was getting other comics to submit bits of dialogue and saying, it was very good, but could you do it again into a cushion? It would just make it slightly easier for me to edit down. And that was the only way of making it workable, because people were doing it too well.
Yeah, because I record things in high quality and they always sound like they're coming from the 60s anyway. And it was a very, very good podcast. And you were saying that you were under a cover now. There's been a new development in technology. Someone's invented a box that you can put your head into or record into. Yeah,
Really a thing?
it was a Kickstarter, and it was on this show. I can't remember where it was, but all these same celebrities doing, oh, I can hear myself in here. Oh, it's soundproof, and they would stick their hand into the box.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah, well, sold.
Yeah, there was holes on either side so you can shove stuff in it.
Brilliant.
Yeah, it's always good to have a hole. So, one of the things you've done in your online career that is on the British Comedy Guide is one of the greatest things ever. What were they like making the Young One parody, The Gun Ones?
Oh, goodness. Well, the Gun Ones was enormous fun. And this was an episode of Boondoggle, wasn't it? The web series that that I made with Sam Nicoresi and also Shan Doxey and Zoe Tomlin.
Yeah.
All of us still working in the industry, just separately. We did Boondoggle, went our separate ways and never spoke of it again. The Gun Ones was a lot of fun. And how that worked was you would essentially... Boondoggle was a live night. And there was a multimedia element where we would film essentially a web series alongside. I think what drove us apart was probably the workload. Turns out we were doing twice what was healthy. So we would give ourselves basically an episode to do each month, and we'd take it in turn. So we'd write different episodes each time. So Sam did a couple. I think I did the third one. Shan wrote one about the weather report. And I think Zoe and John, our director, wrote the Gun one. So that was theirs that they'd scripted. And it was so much fun doing that. What was slightly more nerve-wracking was, obviously, we had lots of plastic guns from toy shops and things that we gathered together. And I was on duty to collect all those up. And to get to the house where we were filming it, I had to take all of those weapons on the tube through the barriers. So I was being very careful to look as respectable as possible, so I wouldn't get into trouble with the London Transport Police. Luckily, it was all right in the end. But so it was quite hair-raising the actual getting there. Actually filming it relatively straightforward.
Yeah, and it was very good. So Zoe Tomlin, if you are watching, please reply to all my messages again. Don't leave me ignored, please.
Now we get back to him. He's great. Come on.
Yeah. Oh. And one of the things you've done outside of the world of funny ha-ha comedy is how did you get to work at one of the world's second most popular TV? No, it's first. Hang on. It's the world's first popular TV show around the world for children, because it's almost running. And then that's Blue Peter. And then Play School Australia is the second. What were they like working on and working at? Because you're on and at Blue Peter.
Well, as someone who moved to Manchester because Blue Peter was here and CBBC was here, I knew all of this immediacy. I knew this was here, and I wanted to be there. As someone who went to all that trouble, absolutely worth it. It is as nice a job as you would imagine it being. And I work specifically, well, nominally on the correspondence team, which means that every day the post will arrive. The few of us who are in the office will open that up, we'll file that away, then you'll go back to one of many folders of post that's come on the previous day, and just kept sending the badges out. It also involves administering competitions, including the Doctor Who one that we did most recently, which has been a lot of work, but a lot of fun. It's been incredibly rewarding, and it's a rewarding job replying to the post. I think you realise from your childhood, if you're a fan of the show, but also if you haven't watched it growing up, and there are one or two, I don't talk to them, but when they come up, you'll open the post bag and you realise just how much kids trust this show, and as far as they're concerned, they're Abby and Joel are their friend when they're writing in, and you all have something incredibly touching one moment because they've done some amazing fundraising. You'll have something utterly hilarious the next because they've written some sort of comic about a poo that goes for a walk or something. Mercifully rare, but it does happen. You never know exactly what you're going to end up with from day to day or minute to minute. But what's nice about working on Blue Peter is because the team is quite close, not just the badge team, but the studio team, the film team. People will chip in and help out with each other's departments. So members on the badge team will help out on a busy day in studio. We just had our Christmas show as we're recording this, and obviously that involved ferrying in 200 children to form a choir. It
was quite good, that choir.
It was a good choir. It was a good choir. Well, they're versatile. They can do Mariah Carey, not just carols. You're all fine.
And do you reckon that because you're tying out all the posts and all this, do you reckon there's anyone that works with you called Peter? Because he could be Blue Post Peter.
Blue Post Peter. I think that's me after I've left, probably. I'm very Blue Post Peter once I've left. So it's such a lovely job on that team.
Yeah.
But I think I always like to imagine that Peter Fleming has had some sort of encounter with Blue Peter over the years. Never been sure exactly what, but I'm sure he's done terrible damage.
And do you reckon that you could ever, because comic relief allows people that wouldn't normally get the opportunity to hop into these children areas and create them as filthy as possible, such as the bedtime stories when they were all telling all the parents to do a certain thing to go to sleep. And so do you reckon that Peter Fleming could appear in a comic relief sketch pretending to present Blue Peter?
Well, it seems only appropriate, really. I'm sure it might just have been for a social media post to plug a show, but I think I once implied that Peter Fleming had immaculately disguised himself as Peter Purvis and ended up presenting for a day. Or possibly, yes, I think he got confused with Peter Purvis at reception and ended up accidentally doing Peter Purvis's audition and got him the job, and then they realised who he actually was. I'm sure something like that happened. I can't remember what it was now.
Yeah, and do you reckon that comedy, the comedy industry is like, because of the time we're at where you can do comedy no matter who you are, where you are, or how much money you've got, do you reckon that that's helped the comedy industry thrive, or do you reckon that's hindered it because there's too much comedy knocking about?
Well, that's hard to answer, really. I mean, if we're going down the route of talking about whether there's too much, I suppose you can extend that to all culture. Everything is everywhere all at once. But I think it's definitely a good thing that anything that makes comedy a bit more accessible for people is brilliant. And I think if it means that more people can be noticed from doing something in their bedroom, rather than have to jump through a lot of hoops within a system that might not be right for them. That's brilliant. I think there's still a huge way to go. And you'll also have people who can afford to promote themselves a bit more. And that's, still a really difficult thing that I think the industry still hasn't worked out. And some people probably don't want it to work out as well if they benefit from it, which is a difficult problem to solve, I think. But I think that the more avenues there are for people to find a way into that industry, the better, because it just means that you'll have a bigger range of voices in, and that can only be a good thing. And
with the evolution or might I say de-evolution of people wanting TV to be like it was, as it was, will it was, do you reckon that Peter Fleming, you could do online sketches where you because you work out the BBC, you could get access to old walk-in studios. Do you reckon you could record like mini sketches of old Peter things?
Well, I think one thing I have been wondering about is recording fake recovered footage of Peter's shows, maybe some sort of clip or maybe a reconstruction or something. And I think I'd love to have some sort of top and tail thing with Peter watching back his clip, so excited to see it for the first time, and then saying, wasn't as good as I remembered. I think it'd be lovely to have something like that. But no, I think that there's definitely an avenue for Peter to do something visually. What I liked about the audio side of it is the fact that you can completely bypass the problem that I don't look 80. I think it's something that's it's always hard to convince people. I mean, people if they're not careful might become attuned to the fact that I'm just a guy in his 30s wearing towel. And that's that's disappointing for them. I think when you're just dealing with them through audio, all of that vanishes. So I think audio, it feels like, might be the best format for him of all of them. But you take something different out of every single one. So there's definitely room for him to do something video based. What, I don't know, but there'll be something someday. And
because you create your own voice for it, and I know from the fact that you've done an easier voice than I did, because I have a comedy character that has a really dodgy voice, and I tried to do it on the radio, and I had a cold at the time, so I tried to keep hold of the voice whilst I'm in a cold. How did you come about doing the voice to make it so you could do it in all conditions?
Oh, well, I arrived at it by accident. And interestingly, if you listen to early live clips, the voice is completely different. It's a lot gentler and a little bit slower and significantly less entertaining. Whereas once I become more used to the live show, it suddenly speeds up a lot more and it becomes a little higher pitched as well. And that becomes slightly easier to do over a long period of time. It's not quite as husky, but I mean, my throat still isn't really functional by the end of a show nonetheless. So I wouldn't recommend it to anyone. I think the main problem with Feature is the speed of talking. And how that all came about was I think it was the first time I went up to Edinburgh Fringe. It was just a half-hour set as Peter. And what I'd written was too long. And I realised this the night before the first show of it. And I'm not a very good editor, so I just said it all quicker. And that's basically how it's ended up ever since. And when you do that for every day for a month, you suddenly realise, oh, this way of delivering it has just burned in now. There's actually no way I can slow this down.
And when I created my comedy character, Albert Flowerpop, which there is a correct way of spelling it, some people spell it horrifically wrong, and I did it the first one. It's every clip, it was a different voice, because I had the issue where I couldn't remember the voice I'd said previously. And then I learned one day, miraculously, the voice stayed. And so now I'm just going to voice that, you listen to it and you think, can you understand what's going on? And I got, I don't even know what I said there. And so do you reckon that having a good voice and a voice that is clear enough helps to let the audience, even though they're looking at you and they know you're not that age, do you reckon it helps the audience to visualise what it would look like if you look like you're 80-year-old?
Yeah, I think it definitely does. I think it helps suspend disbelief. I think it also helps you get more on board with the vocabulary that Peter's using as well. It has to be wrapped up in that, because otherwise I don't think you really believe he's from that world of old TV producers wandering around TV Centre in the 60s. I think you have to believe it through the words he uses as well as what he says. So it definitely all helps it feel a bit more wrapped up and a bit more cohesive, definitely.
Yeah. And because of the uprising of Alan Partridge, and because Alan wants to get back on TV, do you reckon that there could ever be a audio, like a podcast crossover or a TV crossover between Peter and Alan, because Alan wants to get back on TV?
Well, surely they met at some point. They must have crossed paths before, and they've obviously decided never to speak of it again. But there's surely. I mean, isn't that the crossover everyone really wants? I mean, why haven't Marvel got onto this? That's what I want to know.
And with your career being ever so vast and wide, not just in comedy, but also in the world of one of the greatest genre programs of all time, Boy Peter, Doctor Who is a family show. I'll argue that to the day I die, because not many children were watching it by themselves. The parents were watching it, obviously. Have you got a particular program or a particular avenue you want to venture out into? Because you are, as you've said, still a whippersnapper.
Well, I think one thing I've always enjoyed is the Saturday morning live show that CBBC does. And interestingly, I did used to work on Saturday Mashup as well, because I think I had the deepest and cheapest voice in the whole of the CBBC operative. And I think Dave Chapman wasn't available for a little while, so Stanley was just away for just I think a few weeks.
Yeah.
And was essentially sending in remote dispatches. Yeah. So they needed something to take the burden off the presenters, so they weren't presenting 2.5 hours on just the two of them. Yeah. So they invented this voiceover character, Voiceover Tom, essentially, filling the role that Mitch did when he was presenting live and kicking. Yeah. So I ended up doing lots of live voiceover on the show. And it was so much fun. And I loved the adrenaline that comes with a live broadcast as well, and trying to fix some sort of problem that goes wrong, which on Mashup there were many, because would anyone watch it if it wasn't chaotic? It would be such a shame. I'd never watch anything as dull as something that went well. Yeah.
And Dave Chapman, again, just reply to me, please.
Dave, he's lovely. Come on, Dave.
Oh yeah, Hank. So would you say? Because I know for a fact, Mashup has had its ups and downs, such as presenters leaving, coming, going. Hacker shoving celebrities into a very small dog kennel, and you're realising, really? Does he really want to have his legs tucked up to his chin? Do you reckon that Mashup is akin to its predecessor of, like, Tiz was, rather than a swap shop?
Oh.
Like an original swap shop, not a Basil Brush swap shop.
Oh, yeah. No, don't worry. I knew which swap shop you meant. Don't worry. It's hard to say, really, because I'm not very familiar with Tiswas, so it's hard to compare. I know it's hard to believe, given the Peter podcast. I've seen and read what I need to know about Tiswas, and then it's got
on DVD as well.
Is it?
Yeah.
Is that one of those things that Network brought out?
Yeah.
Right.
Best of.
I'll snap that up as quickly as I can, because it's probably going for about 200 quid on Amazon Marketplace.
And so, did you reckon that the era of live TV on a Saturday morning and it being, you're going to watch it for this long, do you reckon that thrived because of Mashups bringing the format back, or do you reckon it's like at a standstill because there's no other rivals to attack it?
Oh, that's a good question. I think Mashup definitely keeps that tradition alive, and it shows how valuable that format is. It's a shame you don't have that kind of healthy competition, but I mean, I think that just shows how much children's TV in this country needs more investment and more spotlight. I think Mashup, started out simulcasting on CBC and BBC Two, didn't it? And I'd love that to continue. And you have your Saturday morning repeats, Blue Peter now as well. And I think it's really important and valuable for society generally to have that shop window where children's TV is, where adults are exposed to it as well.
Yeah, because the only competition it has is Sunday Brunch on Channel 4. And I would say they're two vastly different things. It's like Saturday Kitchen is different to Sunday Brunch. You could go to an advert when they really struggle what to say. And on Saturday Kitchen, you see James, and then he just stops talking, and then you think, are you going to say anything? Then 3 hours later, he then chirps up again.
It needs more panic. He needs more panic, Saturday Kitchen. And take it from a 9 to a 10 for me.
Yeah, and he needs adverts. So I just don't think that type of program where you got guests and cooking doesn't really work on a BBC thing. Like Saturday Mashup works really well, because if you get really bored, you chuck a load of gunge at them, or Creamy Muck Muck if you're of that age. And do you reckon that Dick and Dom, if Dick and Dom did Dick and Dom in the Bungalow now, using like better techniques than Mashup uses, do you reckon that it would be as popular in Mashup, or do you reckon Mashup would still be crowned champion?
Cool. It's hard to be sure, because I think people are more careful now behind the scenes in kids' TV, almost certainly because of Dick and Dom. I think so. It's hard to judge. I don't know if they'd get away with some of the things that they did then. I mean, they were so anarchic, and they would show, I think, such open contempt for directors that would come from above them. So it's hard to know who would get away with that. I don't know who'd come out with that now. If the playing field was level, I don't know who would actually triumph.
Because not many people would ring up someone and find out that the grandma's on the other end, and it's the child that's actually watching CITV Saturday morning programme, and they're like, "Oi, watch us," and they're watching Cat Dealey instead of watching Dick and Dom, and it's triumph as justice.
My mum was always adamant we were a BBC household. Apart from my dad, who would just always be watching Corrie, Touch of Frost, Midsummer Murders, he was always just saying, no, he changed the channel back up. So, there was a constant battle between them. It was ugly.
And do you reckon that Peter Fleming would work well living in the world's most dangerous village, Midsummer?
How would Peter Fleming say? I think he'd probably be the killer, wouldn't he? But always by accident. I think that's the thing. I think he would accidentally kill the entire population, is my guess. And I think he'd probably get away with it too. Yeah.
And one of the things they say not to do in the TV industry, but I don't know what's wrong, but you keep on doing it. Why is it easy to work with Henry, the Bully Peter dog?
Oh, Henry. Well, to be fair, I only really work with him in the office. And there, he's just an absolute delight. So I can't really speak for the studio team. I'm sure he does. I'm sure he's a very professional dog. He's the most professional beagle you'll find in the industry. But I remember when he first arrived in the office, everything was new to him. He was so excited. And this was pre-COVID as well. So it was quite a noisy place, the office. There were people everywhere. There was so much stimulus for a little dog. And he would sprint up and down the building for hours. And Michelle, who works in the correspondence team, who looks after Henry as well, she would often leave her desk to go to the kitchen or something like that, and he would immediately go, "Oh, Mum's on the move." He'd get up, he'd start following her, but then he'd lose track of where she'd gone. So he'd just latch on to somebody else, and I had to run down the corridor to follow him because he nearly went in a lift, and we would never have got him back. I don't know where he would have ended up. 3 lifts, 6 floors, he could have gone anywhere. It was nerve-wracking. I think he keeps you from the toes, does Henry? Yeah.
And do you reckon that because Henry is the Bully Peter dog, not a training ground like Iggy was, do you reckon that the audience have got more of a sense of they can attach their love onto this dog rather than knowing that the dog's not going to be there and going to then disappear?
I think that must feed into it to some extent. And definitely when I arrived on the team, Iggy had finished her training, so she was no longer on the show, but we were still getting a lot of pictures about her. So I think as long as there's an animal on the show, kids will catch on whatever happens. But definitely Henry is very popular, and you'll always see that in the postbag from the moment he joined. It's just absolutely full. You'll get many Henrys in a day.
Because Iggy was very popular when I was young. So popular enough, Iggy did this thing. I don't really know too much information, but Iggy did this thing where he went around and lived with other people for a little bit. And so someone that we live near, who's their son's my brother's friend, who's older than me, looked after Iggy. And now she was taking the dog for a walk, and Imagine me younger. There's evidence on YouTube on Tom Mason vlogs for anyone that wants to know where this evidence is. In 2012, and it's me giggling and overexcited, over the dogs. Not of anything else. It's just mum was having a conversation with a parent, and all I did was normally I don't go outside, so I make it outside and film this dog for Iggy. Iggy wasn't doing anything impressive at all. Iggy was just wandering around trying to sniff his own tail.
Oh. Well, I don't know what to say about that. I think you should be ashamed of yourself.
And do you reckon that the dogs become an equal part of celebrability, that they need to wear sunglasses or walking outside enough as the presenters do?
Oh, yeah, Henry's always going out in his shades and his fur coat. He doesn't need it. I keep telling him he's an absolute idiot. But no, he will get mobbed, I think, just as much as any of the presenters do, certainly. I think he is a beloved, he's a national institution, is Henry, yeah.
Yeah, and with having Blue Peter and Most Comedy now on YouTube, do you reckon that harms the TV industry, or do you reckon that just gives the TV industry a tiny bit of a boost?
Well, I suppose it's a chicken and egg thing, really, isn't it? I think once the internet came along and we started to realise all of the potential that was there in streaming, you can't put that genie back in the bottle.
Yeah.
So I think all you can really do is embrace the changes of it. And with CBBC moving online in the next few years, it's interesting to know how that will change things going forward. I mean, I look at Blue Peter and wonder, will we start to think about the actual format of a half-hour magazine show, which I think still has its place. And it's very important you have this mix of things that's presented to people. But I also think, what if you start to think of Blue Peter as literally a magazine? When you open a magazine, you might read it to cover, completely valid approach, or you might go, oh, that looks interesting, I'll go straight to that page. And you could have a magazine format where, like the Hooniverse and iPlayer, you have this collection and you have different Blue Peter challenges, or I'll look under that heading, or exactly the Peterverse.
Yeah.
Copyrighted now. Get it patented.
Yeah. And you say that when CBC goes, I feel like Blue Peter are already starting that by I'm going to say, when they've not got enough time to be bothered to bring out the Big Bang Ball, they make it appear now visually, which I think works, but it does show that everything's moving towards an online era. But when CBC does go online, would that give the opportunity to create a Hooniverse of their own by having every episode that survives of Blue Peter on the iPod? Because I know it's all a box to broadcast if you're a university or college student, but will it all be available to the general public on the iPlayer?
Imagine if it could be. I mean, I'd never leave my bed up. I'd just sit home and watch. I'd waste my life away watching that entire thing just from the very start. Well, as the earliest.
Because the 50s are dead.
Yeah, never recorded it. Very sad.
Well, they might have. It might have been in Turkey, like most of Doctor Who was.
Oh, that'll be it.
Yeah.
You know what? The signal is probably still out there in space somewhere. We just have to somehow overtake it and get it beamed back.
Yeah.
But I think I can imagine the issue there being Doctor Who was such an undertaking to get everything cleared to actually put on in the first place. When you're dealing with a magazine show with so many different contributors and so many people who've given their time and shown their craft, I wonder how difficult it would be. I mean, it's the dream, though, isn't it, to have all of that stuff available? And it's so rich, and Blue Peter's in such a rare position because Biddy Baxter refused to chuck anything away.
Yeah.
All of that stuff exists, and a lot of Doctor Who exists as a result as well, thanks to her.
Yeah. Thank you, Biddy Baxter.
Yeah, cheers, Biddy.
I know she's still alive. And a lot of episodes of Blue Peter are available on YouTube. And there is a Blue Peter YouTube channel, Shock Horror, called Here's What I Made Earlier. The owner managed to get back into the channel after 2 months because he thought he'd forgotten the email. He'd missed the 4 off the email address.
Congrats, by the way.
Yeah. It was me that got the channel back, yeah. And do you reckon that you'll ever go on to do panel shows as yourself, not as Peter?
Oh, never as me. I think one of the things that's always inspired me as Peter is I can get as far away from being me as possible. Yeah. Peter Fleming is the acceptable face of Tom Burgess, as far as I'm concerned. I'll look in the mirror and it just becomes easy to just talk as Peter. It's just, this is dreadful for me. Absolutely.
So do you reckon you'll ever go on to a show such as Taskmaster?
Taskmaster, thank you for acclimatizing to my way of pronouncing these things. I can't imagine. I mean, it seems so utterly nerve-wracking, the idea of Taskmaster. I couldn't subject myself to that. I couldn't cope with being made to look such a fool. I don't know how they do it.
Yeah, and so as we're coming towards the end of this glorious interview, glorious, definitely. This is one of those rare occasions where you've got a comedy character that needs to be on TV. Why is Peter Fleming not on TV?
well, isn't that part of the joy of it? The fact that he clearly belongs on TV and he never gets there. I think that's I mean, I've been wondering to myself, does Peter Fleming one day need to find one of his episodes? And I think, sure, the moment you do, that's the moment you have to stop doing it. So I think that the moment you've actually, it's like when you perfect a craft, you think, oh, where'd you go with this now? I mean, the moment he actually somehow gets back on television, you just sort of think to yourself, oh, well, you've done it now, well done. It's like when we left the EU and suddenly everyone stopped voting UKIP. That.
Yeah. And so have you got any more in-person gigs lined up as Peter, not as yourself?
I have one or two things booked in for the new year. I'm giving myself a little break because what I'd really like to do next year, if I can, is go back to the now much neglected Into the Archives podcast and try and do some more Peter on audio. But I have definitely, I think, got one thing lined up at the Machynlleth Comedy Festival, which will be in Mid Wales in I think early May.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah.
That's the earliest thing I have booked forward. So hopefully I won't forget the voice in between. It seems unlikely at this stage. He's pretty much ingrained. I'm never getting rid of him.
No, and then are you planning to do a Christmas special or something like a Christmas message from Peter to the adoring fans?
I hope so, yes. I'll have to see how my voice holds up because it's been a long year, but also I think I just need to work out what exactly I'm going to put together for him. I did have one idea that you would have absolutely loved, but there's sadly no time to put it together anymore. So I'll tell you after we finish recording in case one day I actually do it for real. I think what I would like to do is also try and find some way of putting this year's live show about Doctor Who and also last year's about the BBC 100 out there so people can enjoy it.
Yeah. And do you reckon the future of the stand-up special is putting them all on YouTube? Because not only are people putting the ones that were on DVD on YouTube, the creators of them are putting the new ones on there because Netflix is becoming the defunct platform for British comedians.
Well, it's hard to be sure, really. I think whatever works for the individual comic, I think always do things on your own terms, I think, is the best advice. So whether that's the future or not, I don't know. Yeah. But it's definitely the present anyway.
Yeah. So, as we draw towards the end of this interview, this is your opportunity to tell people where they can find you. Do not give away your home address.
Okay, so it's flat 2. So you can find Peter Fleming on social media. If X is still going by the time this goes out, who knows? At Peter Fleming TV. You can also find him on YouTube by just searching Peter Fleming. I think his handle is Peter Fleming BBC. I didn't realise when I came up with the character name, he does share a name with John McEnroe's former doubles partner, who regularly provides punditry on Wimbledon and that sort of thing. So I think if you Google Peter Fleming not tennis, that should be fine. But I think if you go where you get your podcast as well and look for Into the Archives with Peter, I don't even know which one to be looking at. Do some fancy cutting between these, and that'll be. I've just given you a lot of editing to do. Sorry about that. If you want to go and listen to Into the Archives with Peter Fleming, the podcast. It's just it's on all of them. Just whatever you use, just type Into the Archives with Peter Fleming, and when you see a black and white picture of me doing this, that's it.
Yeah, and if the British Comedy Guide have updated my profile by then, please, for whatever of earth, do not get us mixed up. We had two separate people. Like Tom Little, he got mixed up with a director who directed some weird film that Tom's never seen or even heard of, and it's his credit on the British Comedy Guide. Yeah. So, we come towards the end of this interview. Now, as you know, this is Series 2, Episode 1 of Joking Apart. And as you're watching this on Tom's Comedy Club, there should be more comedy from me. The sketch show I did, the radio sketch show I did, which wasn't the greatest thing on planet Earth, will return in visual format. So, hopefully, it'll be better than that. Trust me, I will be recreating my Sir Isaac Newton sketch where I will certainly hit my own head with an apple that's not really an apple because I don't really want to injure an apple. I'll injure a tennis ball, it's fine. I don't have enough brain cells anyway. So, there we have it. I'd like to say thank you to Tom.
Thank you for having me. It's been lovely.
Yes, and I'd say thank you for watching. Don't get used to in-person formats for Joking Apart. Are you joking? Well, I might have to be more apart. But anyway, guys, thank you guys for watching. And if Stuart Goldsmith is watching this, yes, I was trying to steal your format. And yes, I didn't do it exactly how you did it. So don't sue me. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.